Welcome to the Fantasy Football Forge. This is Full Face Me. There will be another introduction shortly, at least for one of these videos. So I am putting this in front of the undervalued videos for both of my kicker and my DST videos, because I recorded those thinking I was going to do one video with both the kickers and the DSTs, and so things are a bit jumbled. I've also been working with some sound issues that I think I'm at least in a better place now than I was for those two videos. It's still not behaving like it was prior to me having removed all of my audio, pulled everything apart, but we're getting there, going through a lot of moving around of things, and so that's part of where it's taken me a little bit of time to get some of these videos out. But I just wanted to forewarn you that parts of these two videos, parts of those overvalued videos, may be a bit abrupt, may make parts of these videos also a bit abrupt. That's just how I ended up recording things, and so I hope that everything is all right. So depending on which position it is, which video, there isn't a true intro or a true outro for those, so my apologies for that abruptness, but it is what it is. Now let's go on to the pre-recorded bit and get to the good stuff. This video is going to be on the recap of the 2022 season. We're going to be looking at the kickers. This introduction portion will be in both videos, so if you've already seen this and you know what I have to say in the introduction, skip on forward. But if you haven't seen it yet, then stick around for a little bit, because I'll be going over the entirety of the position quickly with some information that won't be in the rest of the portions of either of these videos. Also, a quick note, if you are looking at this screen in front of you and you are confused and maybe you want to know more about my equalized value EV system, then please check out a video which I'll put a little card at the top right hand portion of the screen for you to that video. That should be, I believe, the overvalued wide receivers video, the first video of this series, which has a lengthy explanation, which is why I'm not going to go into the explanation in each of these videos. Now, I am having some sound issues. I've torn down all of my sound, and we'll see if this video ends up making it up onto the internet or not, depending on how the sound turns out. This is kind of my test video for that. With that said, let's get moving on with the position. First of all, right off the bat here, I'm sorry about this color choice. Could have been more diverse in the colors. Don't know why I ended up going with this scheme and not getting some of the reds down at the bottom. Whatever. I think for the most part you can tell the differences in here, but could have done better there. My bad. Now let's just look at the position as a whole in the 2022 season. Based on my EV scale, who was the best? Who was the worst tight end? Kicker. And I looked at the top 24 kickers based on both the top 24 overall points in the 2022 season and the top 24 based on fantasy points per week, with of course a minimum amount of weeks that they need to play in order to qualify. We'll go through this in tiers. If you're familiar with my EV system, that should help, but here is the color scale, and here is the kicker 1, kicker 6, kicker 12, 18. Those are the colors that represent how they scored, but here's the overall performance. So the kicker 12s was the best average kicker that we had via the EV, and that's going to be Daniel Carlson, Justin Tucker, and Brett Maher as the top 3 kickers of the 2022 season. Then in the next 12 guys who averaged as a kicker 15-ish roughly would be Jason Myers, Michael Badgley, Tyler Bass, Graham Gano, Cameron Dicker, Eddie Pinheiro, Robbie Gould, to wrap that up. So my top 10 kickers there. Just a huge pile of guys in this next tier. So really the position is run out after 10 guys, I would say, that are really going to be able to give you some sort of difference on the season scale. The kicker 18s on average per week are going to be Evan McPherson, Young-Ho Koo, Nick Folk, Matt Prater, Chris Boswell, Riley Patterson, Chase McLaughlin, Harrison Bucker, Kaimi Fairborn, Matt Gay, Brandon McManus, Greg Zerloin, Cade York, Ryan Suckup, Jason Sanders, Greg Joseph, and Will Lutz. Over on the far right-hand side, you can see these are the average fantasy points per week. This is based on the first 17 weeks of the season, not week 18. Most fantasy playoffs don't go to week 18. A lot of teams do some funky things on week 18 with players not playing and whatnot. So I just think that the first 17 weeks is better, more accurate to look at. And over to the right of that is the average, how well they did based on the average ranking. So you can kind of see some of the big differences here if you look at those numbers and what differences they have compared to how they're actually ordered right now. One other thing I do want to quick point out, just so you have some sort of reference here, is that the number one kicker on average per week scored 17 fantasy points, plus or minus 2 points. That's how they would have gotten this purple here. Once again, you can see more on that on the wide receiver video. The number 6 kicker on average per week would have scored you 11 fantasy points in 2022 and 2021. This is 2 years of data now. And for the number 12 kicker, 9 points, 18, 6 points, 24, 4 points, 30, 2 points. So as you can see, once you get into roughly kicker 12, we're already at a point where you're just holding up the position, not really, even kicker 6, not a whole lot better, not really helping the overall team to win or lose games most weeks. Of course, they can be the difference maker. That's just how the position works, already dying out by the top 6 time kicker on average per week. I am absolutely aware that my transition game in these kicker and DST videos is top notch. So if you need lessons on how to create videos for YouTube, I won't even charge for them. I apologize for this wonderful transition game, but it is what it is for these videos. Let's get to the undervalued kickers. Coming in at 3rd place in my most undervalued kickers is going to be a guy who was ranked 8th on the equalized value chart, but came in at 13th for average fantasy points per week. And that player is Cameron Dicker. Now, for the undervalued kickers, we will be considering ties to be more of a positive than a negative thing, as these players are supposed to be worse than the players that we are comparing them to. The competition in this head-to-head race not equal to them. Now, Cameron Dicker, he never scored lower than 5 fantasy points, and he had 2 top 21 finishes, which were his worst in his 10 games played. He truly never put you directly behind the 8 ball by producing top 15 numbers in 80% of his contests and top 12 numbers in 70% of his contests. Even when he was losing matchups for you, they weren't going to be by a whole lot normally on average. And when we compared him to Eddie Pinheiro, Robbie Gould, Young Ho Koo, Nick Folk, and Chase McLaughlin, as you can see here, Cameron Dicker's head-to-head record versus them was 19 wins, 24 losses, and 2 ties. Not the strongest case here, but he was one of the guys that I wanted to point out. And coming in second for the most undervalued kickers, we have a guy who, via the EV, equalized value, was ranked 19th. However, via the average fantasy points per week, was ranked 22nd. And that player is Kaimi Fairbairn. Now, due to his head-to-head record, which once again isn't a perfect measure of whether the EV system is working or not, but despite a pretty up-and-down lineup of performances, his head-to-head record and Dicker's head-to-head record, for purposes of this list, is what caused me to put them in this order. So, versus Matt Gay, Brandon McManus, and Greg Zerloin, we saw Kaimi Fairbairn have a head-to-head record of 23, 21, and 4. There was only one honorable mention to make the honorable mentions list, and that player is going to be Robbie Gould, who had a difference of 2 spots between the average ranking of being 12th on the average fantasy points per week compared to 10th on the EV scale. We are going to move on to the number 1 most undervalued kicker. Despite being ranked 19th via the average fantasy points per week, this player came in 11th place on the equalized value scale, and his name is Evan McPherson. And if you look at what Evan did over the season, with only 1 truly horrible game and less than a handful of really good games, Evan managed to finish as a top 12 kicker in over 50% of his games. Quick reminder, top 12, not meaning literally, but meaning that he scored within what an average top 12 kicker would be, so between 8 and 10 points, as you can see here, and that was in over 50% of his games. Although not usually helping to win you the week, a rare feat at the position, he rarely puts you behind the 8 ball by a whole lot. And so when pitting him up against Young Ho Koo, Nick Folk, Matt Prater, Chris Boswell, Riley Patterson, Chase McLaughlin, Harrison Bucker, and Greg Zerloin, he had a head-to-head record of 46 wins, 48 losses, and 8 ties. And those 8 ties were a big reason why I feel pretty confident about Evan McPherson being the #1 undervalued kicker of the 2022 season. And looking forward, don't judge him too harshly based on what he looked like as far as the average fantasy points per season last season. He is a strong option, definitely, I think, for the 2023 season. And that is going to be it for the kickers. Thank you very much for stopping on through. I appreciate you, and look forward to any other. I don't know what order these are going to be released in. I know, although I am recording these videos first, they're not going to be the first to be released. So goodbye. Draft season should be coming up real shortly. Woohoo!